We'll get in again. Bob, thank you, sir. It's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks, Joe.
You bet. So let's begin our journey with this. I always start with this question. 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing our lives, changing so much about the way we did things. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you do things today?
That's an interesting question because it was kind of like a seminal moment for anybody, especially in California in the restaurant industry. I have this very successful restaurant. And when the governor decided to shut it down, the first thing was the costs that were associated with that. We gave away like about $20,000 worth of food to homeless people and to shelters because when we shut it down, we basically weren't going to be able to keep all that stock in our walk-in box. We had no idea of when it was going to happen or reopen. That happened two or three times. I think three times. They basically started it, shut it down, went through that. When we finally got back to operations, it was an eye opener to me what the community felt about our restaurant. It was like a gathering place, and they had longed for that. And when they weren't having it, the actual influx of people coming back, thanking our staff of having this place to go for their socialization, for everybody being able to get together again and go out when they were deprived of that. And then when they came back in, it kind of turned the light bulb on of the value that a well-run restaurant can be in a community and how it can be a gathering place for people and how people really cherish that. I think the combination of that and the social media, which is separating people, in my viewpoint, not getting them together as much. So people that are in the restaurant industry, I'm not talking about like a drive-through person or something like that. In my particular case, we have what's called a fine casual restaurant where you go for celebrating birthdays, events of life, anniversaries, and so forth like that. Those places elevated in value after COVID, I believe,
Yeah.
for the community. And people actually, I don't think they thought about it as much prior to COVID, but after COVID, some dynamic things changed. We were in the wedding industry as an example. We would do like 70, 80 weddings a year. Average population of these wedding events were anywhere from 150 to 400 people. After COVID, another thing happened. The dynamic of large gatherings shrank. People didn't, for whatever, it's coming back now more, but they were cognizant of like, well, we don't want to have like 200 people. It was kind of like a little weird kind of thing like that, but the quality of the events increased, and the way that people connected, I saw, was more valuable to them, especially in the restaurant. I do a lot of what's called table touching, where I do management by walking around. I'll look in the eyes of the customers and basically know whether my restaurant's operating properly. I have two metrics that I usually use for that: is my walking around and then my tip average. If my servers are getting a 20% tip, it says everything. I already know the people are respecting and enjoying what they're getting. If I've got a server that's got a lower tip average, well, that's just a reflection of their service that they're providing the customer, and it's a red flag for us to basically look at why are they not getting these high tips. They should be getting tipped because that's a reflection of how the people felt about their experience. And in some regards, people are tip weary. But when you go to a place like we have, which is a fine casual dining experience, they're there for that experience. And the only reason they're not going to give a good tip is if they're disappointed in the outcome of what they received. And that human connection that is established between people and servers is something that I think is fading away to a certain degree. It's more monotonous, and the real true operators understand that value of that human connection and make you feel special when they go out for an evening or whatever it is. And if you're able to provide that for people, it's going to always be a successful formula.
So you've had a successful 40 plus years as a serial entrepreneur. You've been in multiple industries, but if I put you in front of 13-year-olds right now, it's career day, and one of the kids wants to know what you do for a living. How do you synthesize your day job, your career, to make it make sense to them?
Well, like a 13-year-old, one of the problems with what's going on now with our youth is instant gratification. They want to have this immediate response or immediate wealth, Hey, I just graduated from college, therefore I'm due a Ferrari or whatever the hell they think. And what I would say is just like in your schooling at 13 years old, it's not going to be easy, but when you finish a hard project or when you do something that you feel good about inside, you put that energy out, that is what being an entrepreneur is all about. By being able to create something, lead people in a direction that gives us all great feedback and information that makes our lives fuller. So, if you want to be an entrepreneur as a 13-year-old person, you want to own your own business, the first thing you're going to need to learn is persistence and hanging in there while things don't go exactly the way you have them planned, and being able to adjust to that. And I would also tell young people, get your heads out of your telephone and communicate with your fellow students and develop people skills that you're able to communicate with others. That is going to be probably the shining light going forward, where young people have those people skills and interconnecting. Because if you have your eye on your phone all the time, you're not developing those skills. I've read somewhere that 90% of communication now is in text messages. And it's not verbal communication. So, like eye contact, being comfortable in a conversation, not being a snowflake or something like that, is a skill that will treat you very well as a young person. And if you focus on that going forward, the rewards are limitless because your competitors are not going to be focusing on that.
For sure. Take me back to when you were that age. What did you want to be when you were young?
Well, it's kind of interesting because when I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. My father worked with his father in a wholesale meat distributorship in San Francisco. And I was able to go to work with him as a young man at 13 years old. And I would go on routes. We had like different routes where they basically sold imported Italian products, salami, mortadella, cheeses, and this kind of thing to small deli stores in the Bay Area that made sandwiches for people and things like that. So I would go on these routes and I would see all aspects of society that normally you wouldn't see. So, for example, we'd go into seedy areas of San Francisco, and the route drivers would have a gun in their back pocket because they might get held up. A lot of the transactions were with cash. I saw a lot of people in that time. Back then it was called winos. They would basically be bums or whatever it might be, but alcohol, poor people that have alcoholism and so forth like that. So I was basically observing you can really, excuse my language, fuck your life up pretty easy. I mean, with different types of things, and that scared me. That I didn't want my life to end that way, or I didn't want my life to go in that journey. So I was dedicated to being an entrepreneur from very beginning age. At 21 years old, I sold everything I owned and went around the world on a trip with some friends where I spent 8 months. We went to 25 or so different countries. And that was a big eye opener for me in respect to what the rest of the world was like. And there was a lot of poverty, there was a lot of hardship, there was a lot of beauty out there. But at the end of the day, it basically synthesized and crystallized in my mind the opportunity America had to offer. And when I came back from that trip, I made a vow to myself I would not squander the opportunity America had. And with $500 in my pocket, I announced to my father that I was going to start my own business. Needless to say, he looked at me like, you have no freaking clue what you just said. Zero. And I honestly, I didn't. But what that ended up doing was when he said that, it gave me that burning desire to show him wrong and be persistent. And every time that failure raised its ugly head, I would not listen to it. I would find a way to work around that, basically from fear of failure. Um, I had fear of failure in a social setting where people knew I was in business myself, and if it didn't work out, then that would be a stigma to me, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Um, but at the end of the day, you're on a knife edge when you're a small time entrepreneur, and you're constantly having to pivot and change and adjust to basically make your way. And I think that young people need to realize the original plan is never going to be the end result. You have to change constantly. I'm a pilot. I've flown helicopters for 25 years. I actually crashed my last helicopter and survived that. That's another story. And then, but when you're flying an airplane, 90% of the time you're off course. Okay, the wind's going to blow you to the left. There's going to be a thermal. It's going to bring you up in altitude. The wind's going to blow you to the right. So you're making constant minor adjustments to stay online
Yeah.
in direction. That's what business is. Business is taking input, understanding what's going on, and then tweaking it a little bit and adjusting it to see if those little changes can improve performance. And that's an ongoing process for any entrepreneur. Sometimes they're radical changes because it becomes obvious. Other times they're just minor incremental changes that basically you're guiding your ship towards higher quality of service, higher quality profitability, and higher guest experience, and also higher experience for your employees. All of those different things put together are that primordial soup that basically can make a successful business.
So who's been that inspirational force that's allowed you to be successful or the hero in your life?
Well, what I do is I do a tremendous amount of reading over the years. So you would look at motivational speakers that would basically tell you the Brian Tracy's, the Tom Hopkins, the Anthony Robbins, and all of the basic motivational speakers, and they would give you ideas. And then I would look at local entrepreneurs in my market. There was one man that I did that I met early on in my career. It was very inspirational. His name was Don Monaco, and he built this company called Don's Mobile Glass. And he was a serial entrepreneur like no other. I'm still friends with him. He's 94 years old or 93 years old at this point right now. We just attended his birthday party. He was a pilot. I really enjoyed his flying. He inspired me to fly. But then he operated this glass business, and he gave me the intricacies of, like, for example, hiring people. He told me when I was hiring people, what I would do is I'd make an interview with them, and I would um, discuss with them the opportunities I had to offer. And then I would always walk them to their car. And when he walked them to their car, he would inspect the inside of the car. If the car looked like they had just went through 5 drive-throughs, threw all the Taco Bell wrappers in the foot place down there, and there was a mess, they didn't get hired because that was an indication of their basically what they were as a person. They were messy or whatever it might be. He goes, if that car was clean and fastidious and taken care of and they took pride in it, I hired it right on the spot. So those kind of insights that he would give me served me well, because anybody in an interview can basically put their best foot forward, but how do you really know where this person's personality was? And that was a very, I guess what you would call a life hack that he had developed that was extremely effective for him. So just little insights like that along the way that you would learn. And then the leadership of people, not always having this ego driven to where you had to take credit. If you can, as an entrepreneur, can just take the back seat and lift your employees up and give them the credit when they in fact know that they were partially responsible, but you actually helped them, but you are taking a back seat, that goes miles in the way that the people respect you because of being humble in the way that you approach your interconnections with people. And I think that a lot of training or a lot of things goes on to where in sports and all different aspects where you want to be seen as the leader, the top dog, or whatever it is. And in a lot of respects, that effort basically poisons the well of your fellow workers.
So a synthesis of this business genius you have is in
What?
Don't Look.
Wait, whoa, 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 whoa! What is this business genius thing? I don't know anything about that.
You got a book. It's in there. What, right? I mean,
I got a book. I got a book. Yeah.
you're certified. So talk to me about what was the idea, what made you write this book, and what are you hoping the reader gets from this collection?
Well, the primary motivation initially to write the book was my grandchildren. As you do a lot of reading, what basically you end up with is your personal space. And when you're on this planet, more than likely 15, 5 years, 10 years after you pass, nobody's even going to mention your name. They're not even going to know who you were. So we have this short window of time. And if we make an impact on people, one of the biggest things that I want to do is my family. I wanted my children, my grandchildren to know who I was and what my life journey was and why which I'm called Papa Bob. What Papa Bob did. Well, so I wrote this book. It's actually it is what my wife says is the grandchild version, sanitized, very clean, not a lot of the actual drama that I could have added into it, which was the reality of it. But it basically was lessons that I wanted to share with my grandchildren, but also wanted to share with entrepreneurs to explain to them that a journey that you take once you become an entrepreneur is going to be the most fulfilling journey that you will ever decide to take, but it is going to be the hardest journey you ever go on. So the combination of both of those, and as we grow in life, we realize that the value that we bring and carry with us is primarily through our experiences. We could keep score with how much money do we make or what's our profit margin on this or on that, but that interconnection of people, not in my particular case, leading people, mentoring young men up through adversity is a very fulfilling thing for me. I had 4 daughters. I never had any sons. So I've picked, they pick me, usually employees, young men. I probably got 5 or 6 or 7 different young men that I took on. Some of them might not have had a father. One particular one came back from 2 tours in Iraq. The country had broken him. He'd seen his buddies die in his arms and things like that. And bringing him back to a fulfilling life through gentle work. And these people are fragile in some regards, this PSD and all of the rest of this stuff. You don't really understand what their life has been like. I wouldn't know what it would like to have one of my colleagues die in my arms after an IUD or being shot. And I wasn't shot, but the guy right next to me was shot. And he experienced those things. And it kind of humbled me how my life has been very gifted compared to his life in relationship to just having that tragedy involved in it. So when you decide to go and to become an entrepreneur, you're basically deciding several things. One thing is you're deciding that you're going to be a leader, and that you don't know it originally. But when you start growing, you understand that you have to get people motivated to go in the same direction you are. The only way that that's going to happen is if those people feel respected and feel honored to work in something that they feel is a worthy cause. So, I don't know that I would have been a very good drug dealer because I would not have been being able to motivate people to sell more drugs. I wouldn't do that. So I had to have something. When I very first started out, it was interesting. I went around the world. I came back. I basically had almost no money, and I went to a hot tub party in Marin County, and there was like the kind of the coming thing, like hot tubs. So I had there's what's called a penstock, and in California during the World War II, they had a lot of these little reservoirs in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and these reservoirs would generate power, and the pipes would go down to this little generation station. Well, these pipes were around 5 feet around in diameter, and they made them out of wood. They made them out of redwood in World War II because the country was confiscating all the metal for the war effort. Well, in the late 70s, they started to replace these wooden pipes with metal pipes. We went and made an auction and bought this 5 foot diameter round redwood pipe. I bought 1,700 feet of it for $1,700, $1 a foot. We cut it with chainsaws. We took it apart. It had the rings on it and everything. We put what's called a dado wedge, like an indentation in the bottom of it, put a bottom in it, and called them vintage hot tubs. Well, we got called by swimming pool contractors to put hot tubs in because people didn't want the cement spas at that point in time. They wanted like the redwood hot tub and a deck next to their pool. as I was working on these different projects and being called in on that, I was learned about the swimming pool business, and how people were developing their yards and so forth. Well, the state of California decided, hey, you have to have a contractor's license to install hot tubs because there's a lot of hippies and people ripping people off and this and that. So they basically put this like barrier of entry into the hot tub business by having a or a swimming pool contractor's license. Well, we were able to get that license. And then at that point, myself and my ex partner looked at each other and go, why don't we build swimming pools? So I started out constructing swimming pools, basically all subcontracting. I didn't have any equipment. I basically called a guy to dig it, all of this kind of thing. What we discovered relatively quickly was there was a pool of subcontractors and there was a pool of contractors. They were using the same people to build the pools. All of these guys were, just using the same pool of subs. What ended up happening was you weren't able to timely construct a project because, like, for example, if I made a contract with a guy and said, I want to dig this pool at XYZ address on Tuesday morning at 6 o'clock, they write me in the calendar, okay, we'll see you at 6 o'clock. Well, on Tuesday morning at 5 o'clock, one of my competitors would call that guy and say, if you come to my job, I'll pay you an extra $500. So then what would happen was I'd be waiting at the job site for this guy to show up, and all of a sudden they're not showing up. I call them at 8 o'clock, and all of a sudden their dog died, something happened, some bullshit excuse. But at the end of the day, I knew I was bribed out of that slot. So at that point, okay, I got to control the process. So over the next 10 or so years, we bought the dump trucks, we bought the tractors, we hired the plumbers, we hired the steel tires, we bought gunite equipment. We basically built a vertically integrated swimming pool construction company that at the end of the day, it had over 170 employees, 80 moving stock. I was building 500 swimming pools a year. I had developed relationships with home builders where I was able to come in and build the pools while the houses were being constructed, put those pools on the 30-year mortgage. The people spend more money on it. I was basically sweeping all the great jobs off of all of that. And one of my competitors came in and said, hey, I want to buy your company. I mean, at that point, I go, I'm 50 years old. This company's doing great, but it was very stressful. There's a lot of stuff going on. I decided I want to have a new chapter in my life. I built this company up. So I sold that business. I owned this beautiful little restaurant building that we were doing the weddings in. And my daughter said, but Dad, you should go in the restaurant business. Well, at that point, I had this big inflated ego. I thought I could do anything. And I go, if I can run a restaurant, I can fricking do anything. Well, that's true, but it's also very humbling because when I was building a $60,000-$70,000 swimming pool, even like 30, 40 years ago, there was a lot of degree of error involved in that. So if I made a $2,000 or $4,000 mistake, it really didn't make that much of a difference in the overall. But if you are selling $50 steaks or $45 and you're doing a four table, that's so much more precise as to your cost structure, all of the variables that are involved in the restaurant. It's such a demanding thing. So I went on this journey to build this restaurant. After 20 years, we became the most successful restaurant in our community. It was a gathering place for everyone. But lo and behold, directly next door to this restaurant was a Mormon church. And the Mormon church decided that they were going to build one of 8 large temples on this property and a bar and a restaurant on the entrance on the way into a Mormon temple is a big no-no.
Yeah.
So that started a 3-year negotiation with the Mormon church to buy out my property and my business. When it got to 3.5 times appraised value, I knew I was getting close to the end. I had taken a trip to Salt Lake and drove around, and you'd see these temples, which are everywhere in the Salt Lake Valley. And every once in a while, you'd see an entry to a temple and a house there with like a 15-foot masonry block wall built around the house. Those were people that got a little greedy.
Yeah.
And they basically said, we're not gonna let that happen. We're stewards of the church's money, and we're gonna build the wall and you can have your house. And all of a sudden, then from a high praise value, it went down to zero almost, when the wall went around it. So I knew that I was treading on water at that point, being able to do that. So when they went 3.5 times, I decided, okay, I'll pull the trigger. I'm going to sell it. Well, that was a really hard decision because I've got this growing business. It's just doing fantastic. We're talking parking lot like this, like 700 feet long, filled with cars every Friday night. It was like a booming freaking restaurant, and I'd go down there. So I decided to sell it, and then I negotiated 20 months of free rent to relocate the restaurant. So a very large multinational billion-dollar development company that was building the largest subdivision in Northern California called River Islands heard that I was closing my restaurant. Unbeknownst to me, the owner and the managers of this big subdivision, my restaurant was their favorite restaurant. They just loved it. They went there. So they approached me to move my restaurant 20 miles to this new subdivision. We came up with this idea to physically pick. I came up with the idea, physically pick up the restaurant, put it on wheels, move it to the new location, build a new building, and insert the old restaurant into the new building so that those memories would be transported to the new location. We make this video. The organization is owned by a billionaire out of the UK. And we make this video and we send him the video. 2 days later, I don't even think it was 2 days later, he calls back to Susan, who was the managing director of this place, and he goes, I want to do this deal. 2 days later, Susan calls me, oh, Alan's here. He wants to talk to you. So I meet this billionaire. We walk around the restaurant. We look at it. He's looking at it. He does developments all over the world. He has developments in Poland, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, France, Poland, South Carolina, North Carolina, Canada, Texas, California, South Korea. He walks to this restaurant and he goes, an architect could not do this. It's too eclectic. But it's got this really cool feel to it, So I really like it. So I agree with you. We'll pick up this building and we'll move it. So that started this process of basically moving people, moving the restaurant 20 miles down the road, this whole YouTube thing that we're documenting this whole thing. And now we're building this 22,000 square foot restaurant adjacent to an amphitheater that will have an acre and a quarter or almost of gardens to do the weddings in. And they basically are letting me design and construct this. So I've got this body of work in my brain. So I've been to like 5,000 houses. I sold almost all the pools because I wanted to know the people. Well, you met these interesting people because the people are usually to a certain degree of success if they're a pool buyer. So you would meet these interesting people. You would see they would hire landscape architects and interior designers and all these kind of things. And you go to these homes and you'd see all this stuff. So I had a tremendous amount of experience on interior and exterior landscape design. And then I was traveling constantly. I've traveled around the world. My entire adult life. I've visited multiple countries, and I'm building an apartment in Sicily right now as an example. So the thing was, how am I going to translate the memories and everything that this business represented to a brand new location? And after this billionaire interviewed me for about 2 hours on a one-on-one, he wanted to know who he was dealing with. He's the third largest landowner in Napa, California. I think the property was somewhere in the neighborhood of, like, in Napa, if you have like high-end grapes, it's like $500,000 to $700,000 an acre. This guy has 1,400 acres of Napa winery, and he was saving this premier lot in this River Island subdivision to put a mini winery on to kind of connect his Napa connection with his subdivision. After the meeting, he went to Susan. He said, Susan, I want to go in partners with Bob. I want to give him the lot that I was saving for the winery. I want to put the Redwood Cafe there, and I want to make it the anchor of our new 15,000 home subdivision. So from the hard decision to close the restaurant and sell it, not knowing what the future was, not knowing what was going to happen. It transformed into a partnership with $1 billion corporation where they are basically helping me build this just amazing facility. They sent me to China to buy art and to buy furniture and different types of issues. I basically have this blank check literally to create an experiential high quality restaurant in California right now. You can watch me on Get Back to Work exclamation point on my website or on my YouTube channel, and you can see this project being constructed. So at 72 years old, when I wanted to ride off in the sunset and basically hang out on some cattle station in Australia, I basically am now constructing the largest project I've ever done in my life. And that basically came from not knowing where I was going to go and pivoting at the right moment and basically taking a chance. Any entrepreneur that's built a business that comes to success, to turn around and say, I'm going to sell it or move on, that's a hard decision. But in a lot of cases, it needs to be done for your own personal growth. And your challenges have been met at that point, and you can take some money off the table. So I've been a big student of a man by the name of Michael Gerber. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He
Uh-huh.
wrote the book called The E-Myth. I interviewed Michael. I had radio shows in the past and so forth. And that business model for most entrepreneurs that are listening to this program, if you were to get the book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, and take that to heart, I think that it would make your life a lot easier in relationship to operating a small company. I don't know if that was too long-winded or not,
No,
Joe.
no, that was good. And what you did in there is you gave a good, huge overview of the girth of the book. So if anybody wants to get a copy, anybody wants to reach out, any of the other good business going on in your life, where's the best place to go? YouTube channel, all the good stuff. Where do they go?
They can go to Amazon. It's called Don't Look Down by Bob Campana. It's on there. And then on YouTube, it's Get Back to Work. And on Instagram, it's Bob Campana. And I'm taking you on this journey of what it's like to construct something from the ground up. So like for example, I'm going online. I want to have drama right from the beginning. So when you walk in, I've got these giant 15, 18-ton boulders that are going to be sentries that are going to hold the gate open when you walk in. So I'm coming somewhere special. I'm somewhere unique. The landscaping is just going to be. So I'm not feeling that the rocks are big enough. So I have some friends that when I went to high school with that worked on a quarry up about a 50 miles away from us. And we basically went up there and changed the blast pattern of their drilling to make giant boulders. I just got a boulder that I bought for the entry that's going to be the marquee to hold my sign on, that's 80 tons.
Wow.
That it's like making a statement. It's like I take this boulder out of Yosemite National Park and put it in right next to the front door of the restaurant and put my sign on it with the flame shooting out the top of it. And then people, it's all about imagery and emotion. And that particular boulder and that sign is for social media. People will go in front of that and they'll take a picture of themselves, and it's directed right next to the front door. So business now, from a marketing standpoint, and for people go, if you have to be involved in social media, you have to basically be able to put your word out there in a way that basically gets people's interest. And so this particular restaurant environment that we're constructing is going to be very eclectic, and there's going to be all kinds of different places to take advantage of those photo ops on the property. And that will basically be another strategy on how we basically expose our brand more by making unique backdrops for people to say, here, I'm this place, and
Yep.
take a look at my network. In the podcasting, it was very interesting. I'm doing podcast as well, and you can go to Bob Campana on my YouTube and check some of my podcast. And one of the guys that I interviewed was a guy by the name of Wambi Rose. And Wambi Rose was the 10th most profitable business ever invested on Shark Tank. And he invented this thing called Love Pop, and we probably all know about it, where these cards that open up and they pop up, and you got like a scene where they open up on. And so as an example, I make a relationship with him, and now we have a special Love Pop opening card that we will hand people in our restaurant on their birthday. Now, one of the things about restaurants, or any business is developing your email list. And how can, and people are kind of guard their email to a certain degree. You don't want to, hand out your email as much because you don't want this junk stuff coming in there and so forth. So I come up with this idea where I'm going to basically make this card for their happy birthday, and they come in, they get a card. What I basically went to Vietnam about 10 years ago, and I'm walking down the street and I see this gong and ceremonially drum store. So I go and I buy this gong, and when I'm coming back, my wife's not going to let me hang a gong in the house. So I come up with this idea that at birthdays at the restaurant, I'm going to come around. I'm going to let the person hit the gong. The gong's noises are going to go out the ethos of space, and the gods are going to grant their wish. It's kind of like a non-denominational kind of instead of people coming clapping their hand, happy birthday, all of that. People actually loved that particular experience. So I'm going to go, how can I creatively gather email addresses at my new restaurant so I can get this critical mass up, so I can market to them and tell them that. So we get this card. We come out with the drum or the gong. We let them hit the gong. And then all the people are sitting around the table. And go, oh my gosh, how fortunate are you? You have just become a member of the Redwood Cafe birthday club. I pull out a card and I send it around the table, and everybody that is experiencing right now, get on our email list, and we'll basically send you announcements for few. And when your next birthday comes, you're going to get a little coupon for a free cocktail or whatever it might be. And because you guys are visiting with this birthday boy or girl, let's get your email addresses too. I'm gathering 7 to 9 email addresses every birthday, every anniversary, going through these cards, and basically they're voluntarily giving to me and building up this list. I started doing this process.
Real quick, Bob, this is going to run out in 30 seconds.
Okay.
I just want to make sure so we don't blip out real quick.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I wanted to keep going, but it's like I was hoping to wrap up succinctly, but